It has been one of the busiest beginnings of a presidency in American history. It's hard to keep up with everything that's happening. So here to help us make sense of all of it is Peter Hamby. Peter, of course, is the host of Good Luck America on Snapchat, a show that has won the Edward R. Murrow Award. Congrats on that. He also hosts The Power That Be, a daily podcast for Puck News about media, politics, and more. Peter, welcome back to The Issue Is.
Great to be back, Alex.
It's crazy that we're still in January. So much has happened. How are you thinking about Donald Trump and everything that he is doing at one time?
It's reminding me of what it was like in his first term, just the always-on spigot of news and takes and push alerts and frantic text, both with friends and family, but also with sources. And I know you were just in Washington, but I was talking to my producer for my Snapchat show. Normal guy. And he's like, during the Biden administration, sometimes we had to search for story ideas every day. Mm-hmm. Now we don't. This is intentional. They've always said, this is a maxim of Steve Bannon from back in the day, to just flood the zone with information. What's different about this time is there still feels like a little bit of shoot from the hip chaos. Trump can't resist picking culture war fights and saying inflammatory things, which we saw from the White House podium just the other day after the plane crash above Reagan National. But they are also much more deliberate. And so there's substantive news there with all of these executive orders. We'll see how much substance gets through Congress, but there is hard news to cover every single day, every single minute, almost in a way there wasn't in 2017.
Well, and it seems like they are most strategic on immigration, which is what the people around Trump actually really care about. You don't hear them talking about the price of eggs all that much, but you see them really focused on immigration.
Yeah, I mean, your pal, Bill at Fox has been covering the border a lot, for many years. And here's the thing that Democrats are finally admitting, mostly in private, some will say it publicly. You know, Trump was kind of right about immigration in the sense that the American public was extremely queasy about all the people coming here from the border, whether they're people seeking asylum from, political discontent in a Central American country or elsewhere, or if they're just trying to come here to work. People were not okay with that. And Joe Biden said in that 2020 debate, basically, come here. And you know what? Migrants listened, and America wasn't okay with that. The thing that is very popular are deportations. It is extremely popular strategy, these executive actions and telling ICE to go into various cities and round up criminals. No one's really against that. I talked to Governor J.B. Pritzker last week or on Friday about this in their ICE raids in Chicago. Chicago is a sanctuary city. Even he, is a guy who's willing to punch at Donald Trump, is basically not sure what to say about this. We need comprehensive immigration reform, but we should definitely deport the criminals. The Trump hardline immigration policy, there's nuances to how public opinion polls respond to it, but generally speaking, it's pretty popular.
And he's producing this like so many other things, like a TV show, right? Having media people in bed with
Dr.
ICE
Phil.
going in there. Yeah, Dr. Phil, the main reporter we all look to for our facts on this stuff. And you're seeing it all play out in real time. And the Democrats, for much of this last 2 weeks, have been kind of paralyzed without anything to say until they got to this spending freeze, which may or may not be happening. And then the Democrats all of a sudden pounced.
Yeah, the spending freeze, which according to various reporting, they might have been too trigger happy with that. They rescinded it the day after, basically because a lot of states were saying their Medicaid portals were being shut down. A lot of the grants that were included in this order could have affected just people's day-to-day experience with the federal government, healthcare, Medicare, Medicaid being probably the biggest one.
Meals on wheels.
All of those things. And so you're exactly right. Prominent Democrats haven't really known how to talk about Donald Trump since losing the election. There's fights about identity politics. The Democratic Party this week, according to Quinnipiac, has reached its lowest approval rating in the history of the Quinnipiac poll at 31%.
Wow.
They are in the pits. This reminds me of 2005 more than anything else after George W. Bush got reelected. But after a couple flubs, and this gets to sort of the chaos energy that Trump has, along with the more deliberate experience, they're smelling a little bit of blood in the water. The question is, Democrats spent 4 years under Trump, and even under Biden, basically just reacting to Trump, reacting to Trump, reacting to Trump. And they should pick certain fights. But the long-term question for Democrats is, what are you guys for? And how do you break through in a media environment where Donald Trump is talking about DEI from the White House podium and blaming the plane crash, or at least correlating it to that?
So how do they?
You know, I asked Governor Pritzker about this yesterday. He said, and I know this sounds kind of boring to us political reporters, it was wages, working people, kitchen table issues. And then I asked him, the Democratic governor of Illinois, who might run for president, by the way.
Is going to run for president.
Yeah, sure, why not? Let's say it out loud.
Right.
I said, you know, Democrats ran on abortion rights in the last election, and Kamala Harris did talk a lot about economic fairness and, tax cuts for the middle class, et cetera, and you still lost. And he acknowledged Donald Trump won the economic argument in the 2024 election, but he did say a lot of it was environmental. You had an unpopular incumbent president with Biden who was forced out of the race, and then, inflation was very real. But inflation currently is still real. I mean, everyone talks about the price of eggs. Price of eggs, still pretty high.
Yeah, and potentially with bird flu, it could go even higher. On powers that be, one of the things you guys analyze is the media, and we hate the phrase the media because now that's so many different things. But how are you thinking about how to cover Donald Trump when you have 200 executive orders on one day? Which one do you pick? Where do you focus? How are you thinking about this?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I will say is compared to 2017, which was very jarring for the country. The election felt like a fluke, and to us in the media, it did too. Unsure how to cover him. I don't want to say the media has adjusted. I think we still respond to pretty much everything. But I don't think the press, and I saw this in the White House briefing on Thursday after the plane crash, they don't seem afraid of him in the way they did last time. He seems, he doesn't like the media. He attacks them. He realizes he's got many channels. Caroline Leavitt, the new press secretary, isn't afraid to attack the media. They just feel like a little more comfortable with him because they've been around him. These are reporters in Washington. But it's just going to be a hard 4 years. It's a long slog. I know I have lots of reporter friends in Washington who are bracing for just a lot of hard work. Like, it's going to be very, very busy. There's no easy answers.
But in credit to him, he's talking to the media.
Yeah.
You think about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, who barely ever engaged in an unscripted way.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump, like him, don't like him, he's talking constantly and giving new material and answering a ton of questions.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's unambiguously a good thing for a president. The question is, how do you cover him in response when you're writing the headlines, when you're choosing which push alerts to send out, et cetera? I mean, a good example is the New York Times the other day, a couple weeks ago, sent out a push alert about Donald Trump's rambling press conference. I think this was right before he was sworn in. And I thought back, has the New York Times did they ever send out a push alert about any Joe Biden rambling press conference? Yeah. That gets us some sort of cultural and political bias in the media, but it does feel like the press is just, last time there was a ratings boom and a click boom and like people were making money in news organizations. In just the last 4 to 8 years, eyeballs have shifted more to our phones. All these cable news networks are down in the ratings. They're bleeding staff. A lot of places are doing layoffs. Like, it's not the same as it was in the first Trump term. In other words, the Trump bump in the press. Mm-hmm. We'll see. There's maybe some little ratings bumps here, but the press was getting a little bit of a sugar high off Trump last time. This time, it just feels like they're knuckling down and trying to grind through it without expecting, all the big boom in ratings that they had last time.
Yeah, and unclear about their own future at the same time. And then you see him settling with news organizations and court and all the rest of it, too. And so a weird sort of dynamic happening. As we're talking with Peter Hamby of Puck News, a question about what we're seeing here in Southern California. In addition to talking about all the national stuff, you live here in Southern California. You've been impacted by the fires. And you've been seeing what's happening with Mayor Karen Bass. I know you sent me this poll. We want to put it up on the screen, talking about her approval and disapproval rating. This is a recent poll. 54% disapprove, 37% approve. So what happens if Rick Caruso, who of course ran against her and lost by about 10 points, got into a race against her this time? According to this poll, Rick Caruso at 43%, Karen Bass at 36%, 21% undecided. This is a Decipher AI poll. Your reading of that and this moment and what Rick Caruso has been doing.
That poll, I mean, I should say, it was, I believe, commissioned by a Republican-leaning media firm. I think they did Nathan Hawkins' DA race. That kind of California Republican.
Yeah.
Caruso's number in that poll, lower than his final number in the mayor's race, we should say. Unambiguously bad numbers for Karen Bass in that poll. She can improve that. We'll see if she runs for re-election.
She's already declared that she is running before the mayor's race, so she would have to pull out of the race.
The thing
before the fires.
I wrote a column about this for Puck a couple weeks ago, and an astute veteran of many mayoral offices told me that mayors come into office and they get two things. One is something they chose, and one is something they didn't, something that happens to them, in other words. Karen Bass was elected promising to clean up homelessness. Her television ad said there's a fire at home and I'm running home to put out the fire. You know, that doesn't sound great in hindsight. But the thing that chose her is the fire. And most regular voters in any city don't think on a daily basis about what their city council person is doing, what the mayor's doing, even what the governor's doing, until it really hits home. So she has been defined, and this is largely a communications issue because the mayor of Los Angeles doesn't have a ton of executive powers, but she's been defined by not being here for the fire. So, you know,
for the first day, I mean, she came here after, in fairness to her.
Correct. Yeah. But she did leave after being aware of the fire threat.
Right.
That's the important thing.
Right.
And that's the thing that most people know about her now. That's the thing. She was kind of a cipher, generic Democrat, had made progress on homelessness, I think we should say, along with the city council. But, you know, now this is what she's known for. It's very hard for any politician. I've been around so many losing campaigns at every level. It's hard to crawl out of a hole. It's really, really hard. As for Caruso, you know, he seems like, you know, Palisades guy, loves the Palisades, clearly. You know, the question for me, and I know you've been talking to sources about this too, is does he run for mayor or does he run for governor of California? Because I do think that after the fires, after the Democratic Party basically bottoming out last year, there was room not for a Republican governor of California, but for a self-styled independent, a strong executive. Who else in the state could pull that off other than him? And I think that's what he's thinking about.
I mean, he had said to me before the fires that he was strongly considering running for governor. And I think part of that reason was because he didn't think there was a path to run for mayor because Karen Bass looked like she was a lock for re-election. Now, there may be a path to run for mayor, which may be what he really loves, Los Angeles. But the thought also could be California governor, way more powerful, way more important of a job. Yeah. And if he's got a path for that, maybe go for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly right. That's the choice. I do think he really cares about Los Angeles. Like, he's an LA guy, everyone I've talked to around him. You know, Karen Bass loves Los Angeles too. I'm already envisioning the campaign next year, and it's the Sky News interview where they caught Karen Bass in the airport. Do you have anything to say to the citizens of Los Angeles about the fires? Blank stare, nothing. That's a killer. That's a killer ad. How do you... Like, Rick Caruso could run a single issue campaign against her about not being here and not showing leadership. Again, we have LA County, we've got the fire department, we've got the Department of Water and Power, all these agencies, like all these overlapping authorities where we live here in Los Angeles County. The one thing the mayor has to do, the one thing, is show leadership, set an agenda and be a leader in a time of crisis. And we all have friends that night who weren't sure what to do that first Tuesday night of the fires, whether you're in Altadena or Palisades, looking for some kind of guidance, leadership. Should we flee? What's the air quality like? And typically you would look for a mayor to be like the person to step in and give you that update, but she wasn't here.
And she wasn't here to call into our news broadcast, but Rick Caruso was with his criticism of her.
That's the other thing. She's also kind of been in a defensive posture with the press, not in the last few weeks. She did a walk and talk in the Palisades with Steve Soboroff and brought reporters along, but she's not jousting with reporters. She's not on offense. And one thing I've learned about her is, and I kind of made a mistake in my column that I wrote about her, that she was a detail-oriented member of Congress who, you know, liked to get her hands in the weeds of policy issues. Someone called me who'd worked with her on Capitol Hill and said, it's actually not that, even though she's good at that sometimes. It's more that she's a consensus builder. It's that community organizer thing, right?
Locking arms.
You know, it's sort of like the Kamala Harris's prosecutor thing. She's always going to be an attorney. Not that she's not an incredibly talented politician, Kamala Harris. And, you know, a community organizer, bring people together, find consensus, could be good for Los Angeles over time solving something like homelessness, housing, but in a crisis, when you need a leader,
right?
I feel like a lot of people in this city and people in Democratic politics here didn't feel that from her.
Right, and so the question is, where does she go from here? Open invite. We'd love to have her on the show and hear more of her perspective. Peter, thank you so much for sharing your perspective. We really appreciate it. And we go to break with some exciting news about our show. A special thanks to the Golden Mike Awards for nominating The Issue Is for Outstanding Public Affairs Show for our special about Father Greg Boyle. They also nominated our sit-down with Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi for Best Podcast, which gives us an opportunity for a shameless plug, because I always love to do that. Search for The Issue Is wherever you stream 4 podcasts for in-depth conversations, including several with Peter Hamby. We'll be right back.